500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, "I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die."
The Phantom,
The ghost who walks,
the Phantom,
enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He finds you.
G'day everybody, and for those who have come in late, you're listening to the 150th episode of X-Band, the Phantom podcast. It's not actually the 150th recorded, it's probably about the 160 odd, but it's the 150th in number. Now, my name is Jermaine, and today I am joined by my two regular buddies in Dan and Stephen. How are you two going?
Yeah, very good, Jermaine. Pleased to be here. Pleased to be talking Phantom and taking mind off other things. We all know that there's a lot of serious stuff going on in the world. We're all pretty happy to take an hour or so out today and stop thinking about all that. And so, pleased to be here talking Phantom.
Yeah, definitely.
And shocked that we have got to 150 so quickly. Feels like just yesterday we were working on the 100th episode.
Are you still having nightmares about that radio play?
Yeah, the editing on that, yes.
Yeah. So are you still neck deep in all of the stuff at school and everything?
Yeah, pretty much. Fair to say that it's not really a school holiday as it might have been in other years. But I'm sure that's pretty much the case for everyone all over. So
yeah. And Stephen, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just I'm looking at this screen and I was having a little chuckle to myself when you're saying just going to be talking fan from the next hour. Like we do 2 hours easy with three of us, and the screen in front of us, we could be up for a little bit more. We're going to have to have a tight rein on this, I think, fellas.
Yeah, no, it will be interesting. I'm looking forward to tonight, guys. So for those who don't know, we're doing, to celebrate our 150th, we're doing a Patreon phone-in special. Now, as we love our Patreons are very, very special to us. So we've gotten them in to help us with our 150th episode. So at the end of every podcast, we thank our Patreons and let people know how they can sign up to be a Patreon. And we always try and give incentives to our Patreons, such as the Phantom Preservation Project, and other things as well, which we'll be announcing soon as well. So, because without our Patreons, none of this would be possible. So today in episode 150, we are throwing the lines open to our Patreons. So basically what's going to happen is, if you ever listen to Talkback Radio, we're going to have questions. They're going to ask them, our Patreons. We've got 12 of them on the phones or on the line already. They're going to give us a question, and then the three of us are going to try and answer it, and then we're going to open the lines to them, and that's where it's going to be interesting, is to let them have a bit of a go answering some of the questions as well. So if you've ever been like myself, and I know Dan has told this story as well, that even today I listen to the podcast and I start telling myself and my other colleagues what they should be saying or what I agree with and don't agree with. And I'm sure all our listeners are very much the same. I see Chris doing an amen in there in the background, so I know he does as well. So this is your chance to do that. So now we have a couple of Patreons. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to them first, let them introduce themselves. They're going to say their name, where they're from, and how long they've been a fan for. So let's let the madness start.
Well, how about if because I've got the gallery view behind the scenes. If you're not on this, I've got the gallery view and Jermaine's recording the speaker view. So if I direct traffic, I can keep track of everybody. Okay.
Yep.
That's all right. So it's absolutely glorious to see so many Phantom backgrounds, people sitting in their skull caves or with their artwork behind them or whatever, and so many Phantom t-shirts. Guys, can I get you all just display whichever Phantom t-shirt you're wearing at the moment? See at least 3, 4 Happy Phantom shirts. Phantom Club of Australia. I don't even know what that one is, Gary. We'll come back to you. Anyway, so let's go around and introduce ourselves. Bradley and Joyful, our first double team. How are you guys?
Well, you've just taken our thunder because everyone knows our name now. We're supposed to introduce ourselves.
Sorry. How am I supposed to ask you to introduce yourself if I can't use your names?
Well, I'm Bradley. That's Joyful. Joyful's a good-looking one. And do we... Now, where do we live? Ginger.
And we're in Ginger in New South Wales, and we say hello to everyone.
Yes, all around wherever you are.
Good on you guys. And how long have you been fans for?
Joy has been a fan for 20-odd years because I put it in the prenups. And as was the colour purple. And she used to barrack Carlton, but I'm not allowed to tell anyone that. And she's also now a diehard Richmond fan.
And how long have you been a fan, Brad?
Oh, no, my dad used to read the Fan Comics, mate. So for a long, long time, but probably the mid-90s is when I started collecting a few more bits and pieces.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. All right. And thank you for your support. We'll keep moving because we've got heaps to get through. Sean, a little bit about yourself and your history with the fandom, mate.
Yeah, so I'm from Sunbury, Victoria. I've been a fan. I've been collecting since the early 90s. So what's that? A bit over 25 years. That's about it. What else would you like to know?
Thanks, Sean, and regular listeners will remember Sean's summary of the Adelaide Supernova for us back in, I can't remember now, November last year. All right, good on you, Sean. Thank you very much. Let's go overseas. Mikael.
Hello, Mikael from Sweden. I've been collecting since '97, so right after all the fun stuff happened, I started collecting. So fun to find all those treasure troves. And I've been in the episodes earlier.
Yes, absolutely. Regular listeners will know Mikael from his reviews of the Swedish comics and, of course, the Phantom card game, which is the Kickstarter starting in 2 or 3 weeks by the time people are listening to this. And we're going to... Sorry?
Sorry, should we get Mikael just to talk briefly about the Patreon-only special while we've got some Patreons on, you reckon?
If you're happy to do that, Mikael?
Yeah, sure. So I don't have a card here since my printer didn't do it, so it's away in Australia. But it's all the patrons going to get a promotional card that's going to look like the theme of the rest of the game, and you can play it in the game, but it's unique. You won't get it if you buy the game or anywhere else. It's only to Patreons through Chronicle Chambers, and the card is called Chronicle Chamber. And yeah, I hope you will get them soon, at least before the Kickstarter.
Yes.
Looking forward to that. So good on you, Mikael, and thank you for everything that you've contributed to the podcast and the website over the last couple of years. Someone else we've already spoken to on the podcast a while back produced his own book all about rings. Gary Horn. How are you, Gary?
Not too bad, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, mate.
Hello?
So a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and how long have you been a fan?
About 30 years. I'm sorry, my voice has gone a bit funny. I'm in Brisbane, Australia. Yeah, looking for a job.
Yes. And by the sound of it, it's probably just for the best that we're all in a Zoom meeting and not within 1.5 meters of you, mate. All right. Thanks, Gary. Then I'm gonna skip this square and I'll come back and I'll explain why in a moment. But I'll come back. Next one is John. How are you, John?
Yeah, g'day, Dan. Good, thanks, mate. John Cookson. I'm in Rockhampton, up in central Queensland, and mate, been a fan since the early '80s and probably collecting seriously since the early '90s.
Very good. And John has also been on the podcast before, talking about experiences of. Weren't you on the podcast where we talked about what you might do with your collection? Big collective, John, and so you were on that chat we had about
if you die.
Yeah, what you were going to do with your which suddenly become a lot more real.
So that podcast, I've got the list of podcasts. So, crikey. The Collection That Does Not Die, which is episode 75.
There you go. Half of our podcasts to go, John. So still with us and pleased to have you. Let's move on. Chris is the next one I can see. Chris, how are you?
Yeah, good, everybody. everybody. I'm also in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. Gary lives just over there from me, not too far away. And I've been collecting for over 40 years. Still love it.
Very good. And I think, Chris, probably the first podcast you were on was probably with Gary, actually, as the three of us walked around the Phantom Art Show in Toowoomba, and I got you guys to give us some reflections on the art show then. So that was, 3 years ago now? So pleased to have you still part of the team.
You know what? I reckon they might even be on an earlier podcast, which was back in 2014 when we did the Enter the Phantom exhibition wrap-up.
Oh, yes, probably.
Yes, and that was Bradley and Joyful's Phantom exhibition.
Yeah, so that was episode 7A.
There you go. That is a long time ago. All right. The next lad I'm going to talk to is going to have to take his microphone off mute, Duncan, to fill us in on how are you, Duncan? Well known a bit amongst all the Phantom people.
Thanks for having me, gang, and thanks for letting me join the group, everyone else. My name's Duncan Munro, and I'm joining you tonight from Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. I've been collecting for 30 years.
Yep, we all seem to be about that time frame. Duncan also featured heavily in our 100th episode of the podcast. He was the voice of the Phantom in the radio play we created. So really appreciated you doing that for us, Duncan. I
appreciated you spending probably 7 weeks splicing all that together.
Yeah, that was a nightmare. Let's go to someone else who's got their microphone on mute at the moment. Swaroop has been on we interviewed Swaroop not many podcasts ago, and he's joined us for this Patreon chat. How are you, Swaroop?
Hi, Dan. I'm good. Hi, everyone. I think I'm interacting with most of you for the first time. Some of you I wouldn't have interacted on Facebook either before. So nice meeting you all. I've been a fan almost forever. Probably ever since I could read. But I started collecting about somewhere between 11 and 15 years ago. I took a break in between and then again resumed about 11 years ago. I live in Bangalore, India.
Excellent. So more international content and flavour for the podcast, which is great. Thank you very much, Swaroop. Michael is joining us as well. How are you, Michael?
I'm well, thank you. So my name's Michael Kavanagh and I'm Sydney, Australia. And I mean, I've been reading Phantom comics since I was a kid, because they're on the show bag, but I've been collecting them regularly since about the early 80s, so almost 40 years. So yeah, so I've got quite a collection at home here.
Awesome. Very much appreciate you joining us, Michael. This is the first time I've seen, we've seen each other face to face, and fantastic to meet you tonight. Thank you for all of your support. Let's keep moving. Paul Maloney, how are you, Paul?
Yeah, good, thanks, Dan. How you doing? I'm Paul Maloney. I'm based in Maryborough in Queensland, and been collecting for somewhere between 25 and 30 years, which appears to be the glory period.
He does. Absolutely. There's a common theme coming through. Let's flip to the other side of the country. Callum Markin, how are you, Callum?
Hi, guys. I'm good. Yeah, well, Callum Markin. I live in WA, up in the hills. I've been collecting since, seriously, say late 80s, early 90s, only as a wee tacker. My mum got me into it, actually. And been here ever since.
Very good. Good on you, Callum. Thanks very much. And thank you for all your support over the years. And now we're going to go back to that screen that I missed, skipped over before because I wanted to save it for last. This is someone who was in episode 1 of the podcast, joined us again for episode 50 of the podcast, sent a message for episode 100 of the podcast, began the podcast, and without his work, none of this would be happening. We're really excited that Joe has been able to join us all the way from the UK. G'day, Joe.
G'day. How are you, fellas? It's been a while.
See you, mate.
You been well over there?
Yeah, doing pretty well. Just, cooped up at home instead of going out to work. So, not that I'm complaining. It's nice. It's actually sunny here for a change.
Oh, wow.
I have heard that. And just to get the formalities out of the road, so you're in London, I think, are you, Joe?
No, I'm about 2 hours out of London, a place called Portsmouth, which, depending on which continuity you read is where the first Phantom is from. Well, his father, I think, anyway. So yeah, I'm in a place called Portsmouth. Originally, I'm from New South Wales, though, back home in Australia. And I've been collecting again for about 30 years.
Excellent. And on behalf of all of us, just to make sure that we don't forget, thank you so much for starting this podcast 5 years ago or so, whatever it was, and kickstarting us all on this journey and giving us lots of opportunity to talk to Phantom creators from all over the world and listen to insights of the way that they've approached the character and talk to other collectors and basically create this whole community. So thank you very much, Joe.
Oh, it's my pleasure, mate. I honestly did not think it would last, more than a year, let alone, what is it now, almost 12 or something, 13 maybe? So, yeah, I'm amazed that it's taken off and grown into its own thing. So thank you guys for keeping it going after I left the country.
Our pleasure.
Very good.
You've gained a bit of a Pommy accent, I reckon, Joe.
Oh, you reckon my wife, who is English, reckons I haven't lost my Australian accent? And my sister, when I visited last year, she kept having me say things like Harry Potter to try and find the Englishness in there. But you're the first person that said I've actually got it. So maybe it's slowly coming in.
So do you still read the Phantom and stuff over there?
I do. Obviously, there's a fair gap between when I read it because my parents still being obviously in Australia, I have all Frew stuff sent to them, so the shipping doesn't cost a fortune. So at the end of every year, or whenever they visit or I visit them, I get a big chunk of Phantom comics to read. Unfortunately, because of what's happening in the world at the moment, I haven't been able to get my comics from last year. I was supposed to visit them. Actually, I would have been coming back yesterday on the plane if COVID-19 hadn't happened. So when I'm going to get the next lot, I'm not sure. But yeah, I try and keep reading as much as I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you joining us.
So
No
that
worries.
means we've got people from Sweden, we've got people from the UK, we've got people from India, as well as covering all points of the compass in Australia as well. So it's funny, isn't it, that all of a sudden I asked just in the pre-show chat how many people were using Zoom for the first time or had used Zoom for the first time in the last fortnight or so, and it's most of us. It's bizarre that what we've been doing on the podcast for the last 6 months or so with Zoom has suddenly we look like experts because we've been using it for 6 months, and suddenly everything that's on the TV looks like it's podcast and YouTube quality. So really enjoying the world catching up to Chronicle Chamber.
The Chronicle Chamber is leading the way. It's the world leader in mass communication.
Bit more advanced than Jungle Drums, though, eh?
A little bit. All right, so that's all the introductions out of the way, Jermaine. Let's get on with the show.
Yeah, I'm going to hand the next part over to Stephen.
Okay, so was mentioned earlier. Hang on, I've got to try and get my the run sheet going and still see you guys and try and communicate. So there's a number of topics that have been put forward. After the Bushfire Appeal book, have you gotten an urge to make more licensed products? What would be the dream Phantom-related thing to produce? Yeah, and what would be and we'll see what the follow-up question is after that. So, fellas, we have discussed the book and how excited we were to actually get it licensed. Have we got the itch to do another one? And what could we do as a Chronicle Chamber licensed product? What do you reckon, Jim?
Definitely still got the itch.
I better throw to you first, seeing as I've a crack at you.
Thanks, mate. No, definitely still got the itch.
There's a cream for that.
Yeah, there it is. But no, the Phantom book was one of my lifetime goals to create something licensed for the Phantom. Still would like to do it again. Whether it happens, don't know. We were looking at doing more stuff related to the Bushfire book, but with the current crisis and stuff like that, it didn't really pan out. Maybe in the future, but probably not. I guess I wouldn't mind doing some more stuff like what we did with Sell Voluto, where like they get stuff and then we help them distribute. That was kind of cool as well. I didn't mind that. But yeah, I would like to see some more stuff. As a completist, of course, I would, and as an addict, I would like to see more.
All right, Dan, what's something else that you think Chronicle Chamber could produce?
Well, despite the valiant efforts of all of our Patreons who have joined us tonight, we're not swimming in cash. So buying licenses for things is not cheap for King Features. And so personally, I think we probably still need to work with the license that we've got and look at this bushfire appeal book and what can we do more with it. And Jermaine's absolutely right. The COVID crisis has put a big stop to that. But, you know, we've only got 35 books left, so they're just about sold out. A couple of the people who I'm looking at now did express interest in a hardcover version of the book, so maybe that's something we could do. Maybe for the anniversary next year, things will have calmed down in the health world, I hope, and maybe for the anniversary of the bushfires or something, we could look at bringing out those sticker sheets or whatever else that we talked about with those same images, because they are covered by the license and any print material is. So I think there's probably a little bit more we can do with that. In terms of other licensed stuff, look, the dream would be to produce. I'd love to do what the Phantom Club of Australia, Hendo's Phantom Club, did, and be able to produce shirts and stickers and all that sort of stuff, and all have them licensed. But it's the cost is fairly prohibitive. And again, there's a few people who I'm looking at who have also produced licensed stuff and know that the King Features do get their piece of the pie. I'm seeing some nodding. So it's we did look into licensed Chronicle Chamber merch at one point and talked to Merchant Wise and to King Features about it, and it was just the cost was too prohibitive. So if we were ever able to get to that point, we could do it. I'd love to do that, but in the meantime, yeah, I'd probably, as I say, at some point be revisiting the bushfire book and be looking to increase the amount of donations we've been able to supply to Red Cross in that sense.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Now, opening it up to the patrons, what would you like to, do any of you have anything that you'd like Chronicle Chamber to produce? You can throw up your hand or just call out your name and we'll throw to you that way. Or if you've got nothing to say, don't say anything. And we'll move
don't
on.
stress about it, because we do still have that cricket's sound effect that we can use if we need to.
Yes, Joe.
If you wanted to do your t-shirts and stuff, I'm pretty sure the word Chronicle Chamber isn't copyrighted, and I'm pretty sure just a regular everyday skull that may or may not be the Phantoms isn't copyrighted, so you could always do something like that. I'd buy one.
A skull on a book, just to add the extra.
Yeah,
See
exactly.
how far we can take it.
Yep.
Yeah. The trick then is to not tell them that you're doing it, because in conversations, of course, I did broach those sorts of areas, and the line was that any fruit of Lee Fawkes' pen belongs to King Features, and they would argue that the Chronicle Chamber is from the Skull Cave, and the skull. Yeah, so you would have to be very careful about it, not tell them. But and none of you can tell them either. If you're listening at home or whatever, shush.
Yes. And we have done some stickers and shirts. I've seen there's a handful of you who are wearing the shirts at the moment. We have done those. What was it, about 2 years ago? No, was it last year?
Last year. Yeah,
last year, and they were quite popular. So we kind of snuck those under the without them knowing about it. So
until now when they listen to this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They listen to the podcast now that after we've done the book.
Don't know. We'll see when if we get an email from them about what you said on the podcast, and then we'll know that they listen to us. But yeah, there's always those options. But yeah, maybe the anniversary is not a bad idea as well. Anyone else got any ideas? Or things that they would like to see produced, whether it's us or Frew or anyone else like that?
Yes. Who we've got down? Callum from WA.
Hey,
You're on the
guys.
line.
Look, Thanks, first time caller, long time listener. Hey, I'd like to see a continuation like the Johnson price guides, but without the price guide thing. It's just more of a, I don't know, inventory of Phantom stuff. I think that'd be pretty cool to do.
Cool.
A lot of things.
They were really cool, and served as a bit of a checklist for us as collectors, didn't they?
Yeah. And there was one that was released recently. Oh, when I say recently, it's probably crikey, it'd be a few years ago now. That wasn't Johnson's price guide. It was a different one. And I think we reviewed it on the show.
Yeah, that was just a list of Frew comics, really.
Yeah.
At the end of the day,
I actually met that bloke at a book fair. He seemed like a nice fella.
There you go. Chris, you were also putting your hand up,
Chris.
mate.
Yep.
Yeah, I was thinking even having a Chronicle Chamber cap might be pretty cool as well.
I think that's a really good idea, and I can angle that. No, I can't angle it up. But having some sort of headgear would be very good for many of us who are in this chat at the moment, and myself included.
It's almost the people that have still got hair.
And some way more than others. Hey, Bradley.
Perhaps.
Would you prefer it like a peak cap or a bucket style? What type of hat you're looking at?
Oh,
Bowler hat.
A normal cap would be fine.
Just a yep.
Who said bowler cap?
Probably the
English. Tommy. Sean, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, but I'm pretty keen on a cap, obviously, as well. I have many. But there's nothing more Aussie than a stubby holder.
Yeah.
Easy to do.
Is there anyone
logo?
Is there anyone holding a Phantom stubby holder right now? Jermaine's just waving one around.
I got mine. Who else has got one? I know Brad's probably got one.
Mine's in the cabinet.
A few people ducking around. There you go. Bradley's been able to reach over and grab one.
Over it. I've got quite a few.
Michael and Duncan have both disappeared off screen, presumably to go and get theirs.
Let's be honest.
Yeah, there's Michael with his.
Yeah,
stubby holders walk, so everyone always needs more.
Yeah. To be honest, the hats and the stubby holders were, I think they were the two that we were thinking about.
Oh, that's a nice one, Duncan.
That is good.
So I think that might be. So there's definitely interest in those ones.
Very cool. Duncan's just shown his as well. So
for those of you listening on the audio rather than the video, is that the Legacy and the Law image?
Yeah, Moonstone.
Moonstone. Yep. I'm getting a nod.
Yeah, I think I've got that one as well somewhere.
Be surprised if you didn't.
Cool. Anyone else got any ideas?
No.
All right.
Now, do you mind if I keep going and we'll write it out?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's a good way to open up, and a few people have had a bit of a chat. Now, looking at all these screens, a lot of people are in their Phantom rooms or in front of their Phantom collections. Now, this question came from Chris. Do you remember what your question was, Chris? Would you like to say it, or do you want me to just go for it?
Yeah. I was just wondering what people had as perhaps their top 3 items that they've been chasing as collectors. For me, the top 3 that I took a long time to get was Phantom Frew #1, the Sirocco statues, and the rubber ring. So I completed that set about 2 years, just over a year ago, but it took me 40 years to chase the top 3 that I was after.
So, Chris, does that mean that you're now completely satisfied and have stopped hunting things?
I was satisfied for a little while, but no, there's so much stuff. I mean, when can you stop? Yeah. No, I'm always looking. Anything I don't have, I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But they were specific items that, for me, summed up. I guess they were just the goals that I had to make me feel happy. That was an achievement to get to.
Yeah,
So,
there's certain...
what other people might have as their top 3, and have they succeeded in getting it?
So, are you interested in what people had as a Grail item and then found, or what we're still chasing?
doesn't matter. It's just a topic for conversation. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, I was absolutely thrilled when I was able to pick up a piece of Cy Barry art. I got a page from. Well, I've got 3 Sunday pages from Cy Barry now, and I need to stop. I'm not Jamie Diaz. That will do me. A grail item for me would obviously be a piece of Wilson McCoy or Ray Moore original art. I think either of those would be fantastic.
And what about you, Jam? What are some things that you'll be chasing?
So probably still the South African comic. That's one that I'm still chasing. That's one of the grow. Yeah, I know, Chris.
Big grins from Chris there.
They're pretty easy to find, aren't they, Chris?
Yeah. Yeah, lost my train of thought. So that's probably top. The other ones that I've got would be probably a Sirocco and a Graham Nolan Sunday. They'll be probably they're probably my top 3. And I've got kind of like 2 of them, and then to complete the collection of a Phantom comic from every country would be the South African.
Very good. Well, for myself, I'm still working on getting I know all of you guys are probably all sorted, but I'm still just missing I'm still just missing a couple of comics from 1,000 to present. So I'll pick those couple up, and that'll be all right. I'd love to get number 1. That'll be great. As would the Sirocco, but I don't know. We'll keep on searching and see how we go. Bradley, you're waving your arms madly. What's up to there?
This plate here, I was lucky enough to get on our honeymoon 20 odd years ago.
20 years ago.
Well, just over 20 years ago. And not once, but 3 times did Joy have to leave the shop and go back and put money in the parking meter so I could get this plate. So this is probably, because of that, I knew I had a keeper then, 20 years ago. Well, probably before that.
So that's a Monkeys of Melbourne plate with the classic crossed arms pose.
Well, that way, sorry.
Oh, I thought that was the rare one where it was painted on the side. Sorry there.
Yeah. Well, this is the very rare one. That's the one I got.
That's the standard one there. Yeah.
She said she was going to the parking meter, Bradley. She was going to check the annulment rules in the legislation.
Well, it's a prenup. Joy keeps denying that there was ever a prenup, but I can tell you there bloody was. And the Sirocco, of course, which I have paid for but haven't gone to pick up. And that was a little while ago. And the first statue of the first Phantom that Glenn Ford did, I was wrapped when I got one of those for a birthday present. Guess from who? So they're probably my 3.
Anyone else want to share their 3? What would be 3 grail items that you've chased and found or whatever? Callum, you were first.
Yeah, it's more the chase, but I'm looking at 3 Monkey Toby mugs at the moment, and all 3 of them are different. I've got the solid black one, a light purple one, and then a darker purple one, and I literally fell ass backwards into collecting those. One of them was going to be a pot plant if it wasn't picked up. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Good work on saving it.
Yeah. It's just little things like that, I think, is that's the spark for me.
Yeah.
You just fall into these things. You come across them and you go, that's mine.
Yeah.
And Duncan, you were waving your arm there?
I was just going to say that I'm adding to my grail list as I look in the background of everybody's screens at the moment. I'm just making a list.
Now, Mikhail, in the pre-chat before everyone came in, there was something that was in the background of your little area here that Germ took a liking to. Would you?
There's 2 things actually.
This one.
Just 2.
Oh yeah, there's that one too. I was actually thinking the mask, but yep, that one. So.
Oh yeah, this is the what did I call it? That they send out to the toy stores with like information about the
media release.
Defenders of the Earth. Yeah. And I mean, this mask I bought from eBay, licensed.
Awesome. Do you know the story behind the mask?
Not really.
John or Paul? I'm assuming you two would know the story behind the mask. No?
Paul?
There's a cricket.
I think it's a college or costume mask, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
I think it is. Yes.
But then I know there's in the Swedish club for grown-up Phantom fans. We went together to bought one in rubber that was like they made it in the 50s and the factory burned down, so there's only like 16 of those Swedish masks. But this is of course not it. But we went together and bought it. But we placed it in Bull's headquarters for their protection for the wild.
Oh, wow. That's an awesome story.
Yeah, for my grail item right now, I'm not sure I want to say it because then if it turns up on eBay, but I guess it won't anyway. I would love a animation cell of like the 2040 Phantom and Defenders of the Earth. That would be so awesome.
Yeah.
I can see Joe nodding in approval in that. Joe's on record as being a huge 2040 fan. Have you got one of those cells?
No, I would love to get one of the cells, but actually speaking of 2040, one of my grail items is probably the 2040 press kit, which I don't know if you've seen it, but the cover is black and it's got the Phantom 2040 logo, and then when you open it up on the inside cover, it's all painted with the Ghost Jungle, and it has a whole bunch of information about characters and stuff. I've only ever seen one, and it was way too expensive for me at the time, but I would love to get that. Yeah.
Very good. Oh, we've got some movement at the station. What's happening there?
I think Gary's going.
Gary's going for a wander.
Has anyone else got any grail items they want to discuss?
Sean?
I'll go. So I guess the first piece of my grail item, which I'm unlikely to get, is a piece of Ray Moore art. Just don't have the dollars. They're too rare. I can wish. I've got the cover of the second Frew I ever owned, which I'm pretty happy to have, which was came out of a Melbourne show bag. My first piece of Cy Barry strip art, which came from the proposal. I'm pretty happy with that. And oh god, what else? And I've got a Antonio Lemos painted cover as well, which I got from Antonio, which I'm also pretty proud of as well. So it tends to be for me stuff that takes me back to when I was collecting early, I guess is the way to put it.
And I think that by the sounds of it, a lot of us, certainly the Australian contingent here, will all have really fond memories of those 1990s Frew covers, because that would be the era that most of us sort of fell in love with the character.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about over you, Saru? You're being nice and quiet over there, but we've got this mainly Australian perspective. What about over your way? Is there any collector items where you are?
Yeah, I was about to raise my hand to speak next.
See, I could see the look in your eye.
So I think I mentioned
that's great teaching there, Steve.
I think I mentioned two of my grail items to Dan and German, Newton art and Remo art. But number 3 is the South African comic. So I want German to know that there's going to be immense competition. And don't for a minute think that if Chris ever decides to sell or trade, you'll be the first choice.
Oh no, Chris has already said
he's my friend as well, and we are.
That's mine.
So we have been talking as well. So
Chris is cheating on me.
Little do you both know that I was there about 15 years ago putting dibs on that.
So Chris, it sounds like you've got your retirement.
For those of us who aren't familiar with,
Hey, Bobo.
what's so special about this South African comic? Did they only ever produce one, or what's the go with
No,
this
just
South
the
African
germ
comic?
wants it.
That's enough.
I believe that, yeah, there's not too many known. And again, when I bought it, I did not know it was a South African comic. It was just, a collection that I bought. And then found out that it was from South Africa. And then obviously through conversation with everybody, we found out that, they're not too common. And
So you got the
normal. If anyone comes to visit me, they get the obligatory photo of them with the comic. I can send it to Jermaine. Most people on this call have held it except for Jermaine.
So did you? I never did ask the origin of it. So you genuinely picked it up as just as part of a collection without really knowing what you had?
Yeah, just from a local sale here in Brisbane. It was in the paper a long time ago, many years ago. They were just selling the Phantom collection. So I picked up a couple of things I didn't have, and that was just one of the comics that was in the pile.
Wow.
Got visited by the fairy.
Yeah, the old Phantom Fairy.
What did we pay for it again? Oh, about $20.
Yeah.
we all know that $20 is the number.
Magical figure that you tell your wife that might cost. Cool. Anyone else got a story? Michael, have you got a top three?
It's really hard to put a number on things. I mean, I've got the Phantom statue that's sort of about that tall, and I quite enjoyed the ones that I sort of got from the Faffle.
Yeah.
Especially the wooden Phantom one.
The totem.
Yeah, the totem. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I'm trying to think now, Chris. I think I've seen something similar to that in your collection as well. You've got one of the Phantom totems from the art show or similar.
From the art show, I've got the Phantom dumbwaiter. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, it does look similar to that, to the dumbwaiter.
Yeah.
The Gary
It's a
Horn.
good idea, those Faffles.
Yeah, no, it was great.
Really good.
Well played, Paul.
Yeah. I think Paul wants some praise there, so we better give him some praise for coming up with that idea.
Paul did coin the term Faffle well before we made it popular.
You made it popular.
Touche.
So, Paul, what have you got? Some grails? Grails with us?
Yeah, so my grails have probably changed over the years. Initially, it was getting like a Phantom monkey's bust. Once I ticked that off, I was pretty happy. Then I got introduced to the slippery slope of original art by my friend up north in Rockhampton, John. And then the fun started, I guess. So yeah, I've been pretty active in the original art space and been lucky enough to score a couple of nice pieces. Probably one of my favourite, which I'm lucky enough to be able to put up on a wall, is the Doug Kluber original art for his first trade paperback, with the lightning and the skull in the background. So that looks pretty nice on the wall. And then I've also managed to get some Don Newton art over the years as well, which, as my favourite Phantom artist of all time, I'm pretty happy to have tucked away.
On my screen, Swaroop's box just came over to sit next to yours now, Paul. I think you might want to have a chat.
Yes.
I'm just liking Gary's position there. He's got the whole arms crossed. He's got the Rule of the Jungle pose there. He looks like he's ready to say something.
There's no seats in here.
Gary, you must have just about picked up all of your Grail items by now.
I did. I did. All the Siroccos and the rubber stamp ring, and I've lately been getting a few lobby cards from the 1943
from the serial.
Yeah. So, pretty happy with what I'm getting. Slowly.
Cool. Are we all still actively collecting in this year? I suppose in an interesting financial time and all the rest of it. Just show of hands if you have purchased more or still keeping steady with your collecting this year. Yeah, that's pretty much everybody.
I reckon
we know what's important.
Yeah, I reckon for a lot of us, we're probably even maybe buying more because there's no Sydney trip to pay for this year. So I reckon for some of us, we may be spending more. So
no hands up on that one.
Oh,
you're all alone on that one.
Yeah, I've already started
Spending any less
for a
either.
few commissions or.
Well, my wife knows how to work YouTube, so I'm not putting my hand up.
Probably.
Have we missed anybody? I've got a feeling that we've.
Duncan and John, I reckon.
I thought we hadn't said Duncan, and I was going to segue into Duncan when it's talked about the original art before.
So maybe we'll go. John then.
My last bit of original art that I got, I've got to thank Duncan for. When he was overseas last year and at the cons, and he goes, "Oh, I'm going to see I've forgotten his name.
Mike Manley.
Mike Manley. Anything you want to say? Oh yeah, I thought that his strip today was fantastic, and it's the one where the Phantoms. He's up in the trees watching down at the Rhodesian trail what they're doing. I just thought it looked really cool the way that the shadow was done in the outline and the leaves on there. Next thing you know, he picked it up for me and oh wow! So there's my first bit of original art from a daily strip, and I was really, really happy. And thanks once again, Duncan. And so, throwing to you, is there something on your Grail list that you'd like to share, or that you've spent some time getting and you've now got, or whatever, what have you?
Well, firstly, you're welcome for finding you some art. It was the least we could do after you tracked down the Lightning Strikes people from under the desk where they were hiding in Ireland. So well done.
They have gone straight back under the desk.
There's a cellar somewhere.
There was no photos taken that day, unfortunately.
Yeah, that probably should be a
pretty quick.
Grail item if you've got one of those comics.
The Grail item that I was looking for a long time was a page of one of Lee Falk's script pages, which I got last year. And so now on the list would probably be the cover art from my third Phantom comic. Because that hasn't happened.
Because you'd like to write a third story?
Correct.
We haven't seen your second story. We should have said that we're in published writer territory here with Duncan, who of course wrote Hero Complex last year. The second part to that is coming soon, I understand.
That's the allegation. I have seen samples of Jeff's art. It looks amazing. And the most up-to-date information I've got is the issue that arrived today in the mail in the letters section. Dudley references it. He names it the issue by name and says it's coming out around July.
Oh, cool.
So it's apparently with King Features to get the art approved.
Cool. So you're getting your information via the letters section as well.
Correct.
Actually, talking about the letters and at our last podcast when Jermaine and I were interviewing Leonard, I did a little bit of research. Or I read a couple of his stories before we went, and one of the issues that he had written, or one of the stories he had written, the issue that appeared in, your mate Sammy J was the issue that his letter appeared in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit, and nothing more of it, but that's about it. John, what about you?
Look, I guess it's changed a few times over the years. Like initially, I think the big thing was the Sirocco. Like back in the 90s, most people, well, before the internet, most people in Australia didn't even really know that those sorts of things existed. And once we sort of got in found eBay and people like Ed Rhodes and Chris Smith, and realised there's a whole range of items from the US. I think the Sirocco was probably the big thing. And look, it took me 20 years to actually pick one of those up, and it was probably the most gratifying piece to find, I guess. But yeah, like Paul sort of said, I got introduced to art back in 1997 with some Luke McDonald pages, and just fell in love with it. Like initially, I was into comics and early Frews, and I sort of made a decision then, to concentrate more on artwork rather than spending, like $50 to $100 on a early Frew sort of thing. So. And yeah, like as Paul said again, it's a slippery slope, and I've never really sort of recovered, to be honest, from that. So, but yeah, I have been fortunate to, and the big thing that I enjoy, I guess, is actually making contact with the artists and sort of, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, like you had. Internet chat programs like ICQ and then other things sort of come into place, Messenger and those sorts of things email, of course, where you could have conversations, and like, I guess the one that I sort of remember the most would have to be Paul Ryan. I sort of first got in touch with him, just after he started working for Egmont, and just right from the start, he was just a really lovely bloke, engaging, happy to talk to fans and stuff like that. And like over the next 10 years or so, like we became really sort of good friends, and I was buying art from him, and it was really great to meet him at the dinner there a few years ago with Linda, and certainly probably one of the highlights of my fandom collecting, I think. And like everyone else, we were all devastated when he passed away. So, but like meeting those sorts of people, chatting to them, like Antonio Lemos again, just a lovely bloke. His family are beautiful people, and I guess because of his painted covers and stuff like that, he's probably one of the best known and most loved Australian fandom artists. So, it's just good to sort of, in the 30 years that I've been seriously collecting, like building those relationships, and and like you guys are doing now with the podcast, just meeting people behind the scenes and like establishing friendships and those sorts of things. So. And also, of course, all the people that I've met, all the collectors that I've met, across Australia, and so it's going to be a little bit quiet this year. Not going to Sydney and sort of catching up with everyone. We might have to have a podcast that Friday night so we can just all have a few beers and
talk shit.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that, but then I thought.
Not sure how Grange and Dan will recover the next day.
Yeah, but then I thought Bradley and Joyful can't go to Richmond, so they'd have to stay here.
So, John, a follow-on question: is it true that you've got probably more of Antonio Lemos' art than he does?
Yes, it is true, Jim.
And who's got more art between Paul?
John does.
When you know the questions before they're asked.
Paul Maloney's killing me. He's killing me. He'll never admit it though.
Healthy competition, my friend. Healthy competition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
Rightio. Well, I think we've.
Yeah.
Well, hang on, we've got someone else.
No, you go back.
No, I was just in. Oh, I saw someone else come in Joe's background, actually.
Yeah, he's passing through.
So moving on now, are we?
Yep.
Very good. The next question comes from Melbourne, and Duncan, you're on the line.
My question to put to the group is, I want to call it tribal council, and I want to ask you if you had the opportunity to be
to vote someone out,
to be the owner of
Bradley.
Frew or
I second the motion.
We just want to keep the cute one, Bradley. Sorry.
Sorry, Duncan.
He won. Bradley clearly won the immunity challenge. It's if you could be the owner of Frew or Egmont for the day, what would you do?
Do you want to tell us what you would do first, Duncan?
Well, my thing, which I shared with you, would mainly be to make sure that the team is sufficient to do the amount of work that I'm going to give them. Because as we all know that the guys at Frew get pushed from pillar to post to get all the stuff done that they produce for us, and it's just incredible the output that they're making with such a small team. The things I would look at was I really like the idea of the artist edition of classic stories, which is it's high quality reprints of the original art in a larger format and a hardcover with the background of the creators at the front and the back and some of the layout sketches and everything. So it's a collector's thing, and so I'd like to see that. I'd breathe life into Kid Phantom, but support it with some digital media, so that the kids that it should be targeting have another way of getting into it other than walking past it in a newsagent's, because they might not know what a newsagent is. And I would probably stop doing the replica editions.
Yeah.
But look at short version stories to allow Frew to keeping the publications at the same length. I'm making it very Frew centric, but keep the books at the same length. But to be able to have short 8-page stories that aren't connecting, just a short 8-page story that goes at the back of an issue that has come from an overseas story and been translated and is too short for the 32 or 36 page format. That's what I do. Kind of boring.
By yourself to write some more stories?
And obviously, I would make a list of all my favourite artists and assign my scripts to them before I went to lunch.
Put yourself squarely on the roster.
That was before lunch, Duncan.
Yeah, it's before lunch. After lunch, I'd be somewhere in the back room just reading through all the back issues.
Locking yourself in the vault.
That's right.
Awesome.
I really think.
Number 10. Right? Sorry, John.
Sorry, I really think that idea about artist editions would be a cracker.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if they'd know where all the art is. That's with Glenn, the search for Byron. I think like all those pages are scattered, but yeah.
The ones out there in the hallway.
Yeah. So like some of the Keith Shadow stuff on that, like it'd just be brilliant. Yeah.
So you're suggesting more Australian-produced stories, Duncan, not what Hermes have been doing with the American stuff.
Hermes is different. That's just high-quality prints of the Sundays, like in colour. The artist editions, you'll see Marvel, IDW, and DC do them. They're really big. Like they're quite large because they're the original Bristol board size, like that you see the art get done on.
5/17. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got all the markups as it's what went to before it got coloured and all that sort of stuff. And so it's the original artwork, but they put the balloons over the top of it. So you got the original artist edition, but a story.
Which is
like watching.
What's appeared in some of the Hermes, but like as 2 or 3 pages. There's been that horrible book that just came out. What was it? President Kennedy. Sorry, I shouldn't say that out loud. I just did.
Like the President Kennedy's thing. Like that. Yeah.
Yep.
It's very similar to that, but they're really high quality and they're a real feature. Like you put it up, on a coffee table or on a stand in your collection. I know this really helps out like that.
Sorry, someone's audio just went haywire then.
Yeah, sorry about that, listeners.
No, that's a good idea, Duncan. I don't disagree. If they can track the art down the price point may be a problem for Frew purchases, but I agree it'd be a great product.
The price point would also be an issue with me being the owner of Frew for the day.
Very true.
All right. What about you, Dan? What would you do if you were?
Oh, look, a day, in the phrasing of the question, the way that I saw it or hear it is, what would you do if you were there for a day? I don't know. A day's not long enough to get enough stuff done, really, is it? I would probably just spend the whole time in the back room making sure that my pockets couldn't be padded down and that my luggage was full.
I think there's already been a few people that have already done that.
Yep. What about you, Jim?
I would get rid of the replica. And then, now, when I say get rid of the replica, it kind of makes it sound like that I don't want fork stories. And I love the fork stories. We all do. But I think the replica doesn't do them justice. So I would like to see them more like the what happened with the Cyban just recently with the Supernova special back in, was it October or November, where it was coloured, the reproduction quality was probably the best we've ever seen. So I would like to see the classic stories reprinted like that rather than in a replica thing. So that would be my first thing I would do. And then probably another thing would be probably to get Dudley and Glenn some help.
Yeah.
So that would probably be my first two things I would look at doing.
Yeah, I'm going to stand up for the replica series. I don't hate the replica series.
There's that mute button.
I certainly wouldn't be getting rid of them if we could fast track them, I suppose. But look, at the end of the day, it is, and Dudley's told us this, that it's a when it's the replica's turn to come out, he's actually pleased because they're easy to produce, they're quick, they're cheap, they've already got everything on file, and they get some classic stories out into the marketplace for people who may not have read them before, because, you know, the people who are on this call, we've all been collecting for 30, 40 years, but not everybody has. And not everybody has seen all of those stories. And I take your point that it would be nice if they saw them in their original glory and recolored and all the rest of it. But from a price point of view and just getting them out there and for people to see, I fell in love with those stories when they were first being printed in the 80s. There's no reason why people can't fall in love with them now.
Yeah, I just don't think it does them justice, though.
They were good enough for us in the 80s.
But see, what I think I'd be doing is you could take the same stories that were in those replicas that Jim Shepard spent a lot of time reproducing in full and just print that version. So we get to see the full version of the story, not some chopped up thing from, I completely agree. Reprint the stories, but do it in a way that they've done it better.
Justice, because
maybe in the correct order, not reverse order, but the actual proper order. Nice.
Seeing they've gone away now from replicas with the annual, I agree.
It was always a bizarre decision to do the 200 countdown, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And it's Jim Shepard's legacy, the fact that he found the top quality versions of all of these stories. In my opinion, it was probably one of his biggest legacies that he left behind, because we're seeing it now with Herms. Herms are using the same prints that Jim Shepard brought back in the 90s and the 2000s. That's what Herms is using now, plus some other stuff, but it's their basis. So, you know, I just don't think it's doing the legacy that Jim Shepard left justice. Anyone else want to play?
Well, I thought throwing to Joe. I remember, you know, when the X-Band started, he was always full of opinions and how things should be done and what he'd like to see. So, Joe, you're in charge of Frew. What do you want to see happen?
I'm trying to remember what all my opinions now were. I wouldn't get rid of the replicas completely. I'd probably have two, maybe quarterly trade paperback collections. So one would be the classics, kind of like Jermaine said, all nice and coloured, but in a trade paperback format. So it's like, I don't know, $20 or something for 3 or 4 stories. It'll come out, you know, 1 month, and then the next month I might have, or 2 months later, I might have another trade paperback collection of new modern stories, whether that be the ones from Egmont or get someone like Duncan to do some original stuff, some Australian creators. But I do it in the paperback format because they get sold at bookshops, not just comic stores or newsagents, and increase the market visibility of the fandom, because he's still very much, and not to insult anyone, but you can sort of tell by looking at the people in this call, if you're under 20, you probably don't know who he is. Unless you're one of the lucky people whose parents bought them Kid Phantom. So I think if I was in charge of Frew, my big thing would be to push the visibility of the character into kids who might be, or younger readers, not necessarily kids, but even teenagers who might be getting into comics, whether it's because of the Marvel films or, you know, things like the recent Spider-Man video game, or just because they've watched cartoons or it's interesting to them. But just get him out there more so than he already is.
Very good.
Very good.
And I guess from an extension to that, Joe, and I think Swaroop would probably agree, there's probably a fair bit to be gained by Frew trying to get a foothold into that Indian market, whether it be getting printed over there and distributed, because they're doing all the hard work here, but it's a really small footprint when you compare it to an India or a Sweden or Scandinavia.
Yeah, I remember someone asking, I don't know if it was Duncan or Dudley, or Glenn, someone said that they had looked into that, but the problem of distribution was the big thing that was stopping them, because it's, you know, obviously India's a bit of a distance from Australia, and Sweden even more so, so to get the stuff printed and then shipped over there and all that sort of thing was what was holding them back. So they'd have to figure out something around that, but I've got no idea what it would be.
I think that the perfect arrangement would be that they get it actually printed over there.
Yeah.
To save that postage cost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it'll be at lower cost over there. What's your opinion, Swaroop?
Yeah.
I agree, Paul. I think they did try tying up with the distributor. They spoke to 2 or 3. I did help introduce one or 2 of them. That didn't go anywhere both on financial terms and mostly on financial terms. But then they decided, I think, to print in India, which was a much smarter decision. It can get a wider fan base in India, because there are a huge number of Indian collectors who collect everything Indian. And when you have an Indian cover price, that makes it an Indian comic for the collectors locally here. And that would have been a big thing. But I think that didn't go anywhere for some reason. I actually do not know what happened after that. They did consider printing in India.
So maybe it's just up to you, buddy.
Well, what would you do, Swoop, if you're in charge of something?
I do not know about Frew, but if I was running Kingfishers for a day, I would have closed a movie deal.
Greenlight a good script.
That would be good. Is that Duncan putting up his hand to write the script? I see.
Now, someone's been sitting rather quietly for this whole period of time. Joyful, what would you do if you ran Frew?
Oh my goodness! I don't know if you could do in one day, as been said before. But I actually thought Kid Phantom was a great thing. I think we've got to think about, as you said, the general age. We've got to try, for all these collections to be worth anything, we need to be creating or generating interest in the younger generation. And the thing that's against it these days is that there are so many different characters out there. Like Marvel's huge, but you know, there's all these other characters that are coming to light that were never so big. It was always, you know, the Phantom always had in the newspaper and was well known. But I think for Bradley with his huge collection here, and I know he loves collecting and the time span, and it's the chase, as Callum said. But at the end of the day, it'd be nice if it was worth something down the track that you could either pass on or, you know, like, you know.
It is to me.
Yeah, after you. So I like Joe said, maybe it's the way of getting into, because the younger generation look at things differently, or how they find their information differently. Maybe we need to look at that to get that interest out there and get the younger ones aware of Phantom, create that that marketing and that interest.
Very good. What about you, Bradley? Do you agree, or would you do things slightly different?
I would be a fool to disagree with my wife.
That was the correct answer.
I just know something that Joy could do if she was there for a day. Write yourself a cheque for all the money that Bradley's thrown into it in the last 20 years.
If I just got the commission, I'd be all right.
Yeah.
No, I would love to see the Kid Phantom be sustainable, because I love the series, and my grandkids just love the series, the comics, and I think the trade paperback's a good idea to get back in the story. And I would love to see the stories from Duncan and other Aussies and that sort of thing than just grabbing something from Egmont and then translating it and whatever. I would love that, and I don't know how long it takes to write a story. I haven't had a good chat to Duncan about all of that. I really did like Hero Complex, and I like the little things about throwing Sammy J in and just all the little plots that go in. Jamie Diaz has got his ugly mug in a comic book, and I reckon those sorts of things are all great. But yeah, Frew, I think for our benefit, and perhaps from a business point of view, I think that they just tried to put out so many things for us, and maybe they just cut back on a couple. I don't mind getting them all, don't get me wrong, but I think for their health and well-being, they perhaps could have just done a little bit less with some things for their benefit, health-wise, more so than perhaps financially. I don't know, but they've done a lot of things, tried a lot of things, and I love Frew. I reckon they do so much good for us. There'll always be criticisms and what ifs and some, you know, why didn't you do this and do that? But I love Frew, mate. So whatever they do, I'm happy with. But I'm sad that Kid Phantom might not be last.
Yeah, it does seem a shame that, because I agree, they needed to consolidate, and maybe going to Supernova the last 3 or 4 years has sort of put some pressure on them to produce the new thing to come out in June and that sort of thing. It is a shame that Kid Phantom has fallen by the wayside in that consolidation at the moment. So, yeah,
I love Paul's artwork. Every dinner when he does something, I try and get a piece, and we're trying to, because we've got the old skull throne. We're trying to get a commission of most artists of the Phantom on the skull throne. Any era, just A3, and Paul's done that, and I love his artwork and how he and I love how, you know, the stories are going along. I just love Kid Phantom. It's just a bloody shame. I believe it's a shame. John Cookson, because he thinks he knows everything, doesn't really, you know, he's not that fussed about the Kid Phantom. But
yeah, but John's kids are grown up too.
Yeah. So he's just being selfish.
It worth saying that it is. Sorry, guys. It is worth saying that Kid Phantom's still there. Like, you can see the work in progress stuff that Paul's doing. He's still producing work for it, so it's coming in some format. My intention was to say it needs more weight behind it, which I think is what you're saying there. And like Joyful said, a way to make it accessible outside a print comic book first, so that they then discover the comic.
And they did some good work on the website. And initially, there is a Kid Phantom website, and there's a playable game that my son has clocked at least 3 times. But that's kind of the point. He's clocked it now. There's not a level 2, and there's not the extras that were sort of hinted at that were going to come in the website. So that digital presence is so important, and even just the animation that took so long to be available to the public. If they could put some more resources, and we all know there's not a lot of resources to put behind all of these things, but if they could have been able to put more resources behind Kid Phantom in that sense, I think you're right, Duncan. I think it could have had greater success.
And I think the guys really hit a sweet spot with that the single issue that came out with the annual special. That shorter story, about the bullies.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic product to be able to, an entry point for someone who's never read a comic, let alone a Phantom comic, to get into comics and that character.
Yeah.
It's a very well done story and very accessible.
Awesome. Now, I'm quite interested in hearing from Mikkel. Is Mikkel still around?
I think he's just left in the last 30 seconds.
Oh, because he's actually a Phantom Man reader, and I was interested in hearing what he would have done if he was in charge of.
He did tell us at the start that he was on his lunch break over in Sweden, and I think the lunch bell must have just rung over there because he's literally just left.
Bummer.
Maybe we can get him back on for another time.
Yeah.
You can ring him after Jermaine and cut and paste it in later.
Yeah.
Dan's good at cutting and pasting in the middle of stuff.
Actually, we are recording a bit of a sneak behind the scenes. We are recording a podcast with Mikkel this weekend, so that might be a very good idea, Duncan. So
I will take my commission in the first bit of Chronicle Chamber merchandise that you develop.
Has anyone else got any ideas that they would like to see?
Yep, Sean.
Yeah, just to touch on what a lot of people have been saying, but I think from my point of view, Frew have spread themselves pretty thin over the last few years since they took over. They're really good at getting a comic out every 2 weeks. They do that very well. I don't think anyone can complain about that.
No.
But taking on Phantom's World, Giant Size, Kid Phantom, all the stuff for the Supernova, etc., the various other books that have come out, maybe they would be better off consolidating, as they seem to have done.
Yeah.
But also spending some time marketing what they've got, because they're really, really, really bad at it. They threw Kid Phantom out there and sort of abandoned it. There's nothing behind it to push it. There's nothing to try and connect it with a younger audience. We keep hearing from them about how they don't have time because they're busy, but really every issue that comes out, it's a Facebook post. We all do Facebook posts. It can take a minute, 2 minutes. Now, Matt Kime's story, when it came out, that was a story that was meant to fit in between 2 Lee Falk, Ray Moore stories. It was a special edition, but there was nothing to promote it. There was nothing to explain it. And it's been the same with several other special issues that have come out even over the last 12 months or so. What am I trying to say? The comic, which was the mashup of all the artists. I've forgotten its name.
The Jam.
Blood Rain.
Jam, yeah, Blood Rain. Now that should have been a big deal and it should have been promoted, but it wasn't. It just sort of came out, and it's been mentioned here a few times as well. I just think they could do themselves so much more service by promoting what they're doing, trying to develop their readership, rather than trying to come up with much more products.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd be focusing on, trying to do what they do well even better and getting it out to more people.
Letting people know that they're doing it well, because you're absolutely right. And maybe someone who's a part-time media manager or a digital marketing sort of space, that's probably something that they would really benefit from.
Yeah. And I mean, give Jim Shepherd some credit. Like he didn't have the same sort of technology available now, but like the late 80s and the 90s, like he did a lot of advertising, at particular news agencies and point of sales and those sorts of things. I mean, just to get the product out there, the name out there.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Dan
bring
did
back
something
those
about
big
it.
cardboard cutouts.
Well, Dan mentioned there was a story on Chronicle Chamber 12 months ago or so about how many people here come across Frews in show bags at shows. Now, that doesn't happen anymore. They're gone. So even that is and they were issues that had been returned from the newsagents that were worthless, that we used as promotional material.
Yep.
So they turned a negative into a positive and developed a readership. All that's gone by the wayside. And I hate to say it, but even having been to Supernova since Frew's been going, who's at the stall all day?
Us.
Most of us.
We are.
But it doesn't appear to be that, they're there and they're selling stuff, but they're selling it to the same target audience. They're not expanding that market. That's what I'd be focusing on.
Especially if Bradley's there.
Well, clearly they don't need anyone else if Bradley's there.
As long as one of you blokes keep Joy occupied just for 10 minutes, that's all.
Is that all the time you need, Brad?
Yep, it's amazing how much you can buy in 10 minutes, mate.
And yet it still only costs $20.
And the question wasn't intended as a bash through session. It was what you as a fan would like to do if you had the keys to the kingdom. So Jermaine, while Mikhail's not here at the moment, you're probably the one with the most familiarity of the Phantom End series. What would you do if you were at the Egmont office for the day?
Okay,
and everyone else has gone home.
I've got this idea, and I've floated it with some people, and it's got its problems, and it's not perfect. But what I would do is, instead of having two creator teams, so Team Phantom End creating their own stories, and then Frew creating their own stories, and using the same creators a lot of the time, is that you have one creative team. And then that way you cut the costs, in a sense, in half. Both can share the costs, so which means the budgets is lower. And then there's problems with that in the sense that Sweden and Frew readers have different tastes and different and the fans have different what they like and stuff like that. So there's problems with the idea, I'm aware of that. But I think that could help to lower the budget if both companies kind of share the budget and put their resources together to create one team rather than having two creative teams.
My question is, would my Frew Crew badge have reciprocity at the Phantom Man office, or would I be turned away?
What, your Frew Crew badge or your...
Yeah, the Frew Crew badge. Would I be allowed in, or am I kicked out?
Well, I don't know, but I'll put up my hand to be on the editing team for that. And so I can't take bribes.
No one else would get a word in.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
I think your idea has so much merit, Jermaine, that they've actually been doing it since 1936. There is an independent creative team that produces stories for all of the comics around the world, and they're based in America, in New York. At the moment, it's Tony DePaul, Jeff Weigel, and Mike Manley.
And some would say they do the best job.
Some would. Some would.
Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to input? Or should we? Have we got any? I don't think we've got any other questions. Anyone else got anything they want to add to that last discussion?
I just hope Frew stay alive, and whatever they do, I'm happy because I'm still getting a fan comic in Australia.
Yeah,
and I can read it, and so whatever Frew do, I'm happy with. I just don't. I get concerned that they're knocking themselves out to do it. That's all.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. That I guess that Frew and Egmont are still producing comics, and which allows us to be able to read comics because there's heaps of characters out there that don't have comic books and stuff like that. So so that's a very good point. Very good point, Bradley. But what we might do is, unless anyone's got anything else to add, we might begin to start wrapping it up. So has anyone got anything that they want to quickly add before we look to wrap it up?
No, I can't remember who suggested it, but let's do this again on the third Saturday in June.
Well, I'm a fan of that, and I'd like to explore maybe even having an auction on that night.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's still some ways that we can raise some funds for that. We certainly want to explore that. We also want to consult with Richard and Antonio to see if there's a way we can link in with them as well. So
yeah,
it's a great idea. This has worked well, and I think it's worth replicating.
Yeah, and we have briefly mentioned it as well. This was kind of a bit of to test the waters as well. Chris, I saw you raise your hand. Sorry.
Yeah, just before we wrap up there, Chris. Yeah.
I'm going to say what Bradley said.
All right. Well, it sounds like it's a good idea then. You agree?
Hey, Chris.
Mate, we only get to see each other normally once a year, all of us. We have a fantastic weekend every June. So if we could do this where we can see each other and say good day, it wasn't too hard to organise. Of course, we're going to have to start earlier than bloody 9 o'clock because some of us are struggling to stay awake.
I'm impressed we've still got Stephen with us, to be honest.
Hey, Chris.
You guys
Chris?
are just caught up. I don't know what you're complaining about.
Chris, before we go, can you show us that South African comic?
Yeah, if you got a handy, Chris, might as well. And for those who are listening to the podcast, you might want to jump on to the YouTube.
Has Chris got a South African comic?
Wally's going to get it, and to answer Dan about me staying awake, I did mention to my wife that we're doing the podcast today, and I told her what time we're doing. Oh, that's early. So it's not my fault. It's usually we're about to get started around about this time, and now we're about to finishing up.
That is true. It's nice that daylight savings has caught back up with the rest of the world, Stephen. You've come back closer to where we're at.
Oh, that looked like Mikhail came back. Mikhail, just in time.
Except, Dan, we were in the future. We've come back to you. You've caught up with us.
True.
You with us there, Mikhail? No? Yes.
We're waiting for the audio.
Yeah.
Joe, I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from your end.
Okay, sorry.
All good.
Oh, what is that?
What are you showing us?
For those of us who are listening to the podcast, what are you holding there, Chris?
This would be a South African Phantom comic. Have you ever seen one of these?
I've never seen a South African Phantom comic. I've never really known they've existed, to tell you the truth. It hasn't really worried me that much.
I've seen lots of people hold it, but not ever Jermaine.
That's it. There you go.
Is it in English or is it in Afrikaans?
It's in English.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Rip Kirby is the other person on the front cover.
Geez, I might have a couple of those lying around here somewhere.
So, Mikkel, are you still with us? We were just wondering, before we wrap up, you kind of disappeared for a little bit. We're going to ask you a question. If you were in charge of Phantom Men for a day, what would you do?
For Phantom and comic?
Yeah.
I would start trying to get them to do a live action TV series with King Features. But yeah, the comic book, I mean, I really like what you did when you Frew did with the release of the colored daily. I would like us to do something like that, the newly colored daily that Ivan did. I think that looks great. And I would also want them to take a bit of risks and maybe put in some old, like the UK comics and the Defender of the Earth comics, and maybe put in some weird stuff like the second episode instead of having reprints.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Dan and Steve, you got anything you want to add in before we quickly wrap up?
No, I'm sure you'll cover this, but just thank you to all of these beautiful people who have supported the podcast and the website for many years. You know, whether it's Joe who started the whole thing, or everyone who's contributed $1 through Patreon, and the support that you give us, whether it's an email or a message from time to time, just to say, you know, I enjoyed that and it's been going well, or whatever it is. Thank you very much, guys. I'm really pleased that we were able to get you on board for the 150th episode. And again, thanks very much for appreciating what we do, which is just out of a bit of love. So thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. I can't say any better than what Dan has just put forward there. Except before we go, Chris, do you mind if we actually use that image of you holding the South African comic as a new Chronicle Chamber banner or logo? I think they'll touch a lot of people just the right way, and they'll know what we're all about.
Jermaine has received probably 37 photos of me and someone else holding that comic.
Chris, would you be against Chronicle Chamber T-shirts with a picture of the South African comic on the back?
Oh, we're totally going to do that now.
We'll have to at least do it as a sticker, I reckon. Awesome. But no, I like most of yous.
He's going to cry himself to sleep tonight.
But no, seriously, guys, just echoing what Dan said, you guys, the fans, the friendships that we create through the Phantom, and the stories and all that. That's what makes the Phantom so special, is that we have people from different continents. We have people from Australia. We have people from, Europe and Asia and stuff, just with the 15 of us right here. And we've got relationships and friendships, and that's because of the Phantom. And it draws us together, and, we come from different backgrounds. We have different political views, different football teams, and we don't agree on much other stuff. But, we do agree on the Phantom. We all love the Phantom. We put our hard-earned cash on the Phantom. You guys, donate some of your money, which helps us to be able to do stuff. So we really appreciate everything that you do for us. For our listeners, we thank you for listening to us for 150 plus podcasts. You guys, there's probably 300 odd of yous that listen to our podcast at any given time. A huge shout out to you guys, everyone who follows us on Facebook and on the website and everything else like that as well. It's really, really, really means a lot to us. So as we do that, we just do our outro. So if you want to know more about the Patreon, you can find out all about that on our website. It's up if you go onto our main website. It is all up in there. Our website is chroniclechamber.com. If you want to email us or you got some questions, podcast chats, or you want to give us feedback on anything, several ways you can do that is via our email, which is chroniclechamber@gmail.com. You can do it via our social media pages, which is on Facebook, which is chroniclechamber.com, on Twitter, which is @chronicletweets, Instagram, which is @chroniclechamber, and of course you can subscribe to us on our iTunes, or if you are an Android user, there's various other podcast apps that will allow you to be able to get all our podcasts directed to your, whether it's your smartphone or device. And if that doesn't work, you can always go to our website, chroniclechamber.com, and you can find our podcast links there as well. Now, this will be a video as well as an audio. Most of our podcasts are like that as well. So if you want to see the faces of some of our Patreons as they talk about it, or Chris holding the all his collections, you can watch the video as well. So I guess from myself and from the guys, happy Phantoming, and thank you.
Can we get a 15-way happy Phantoming on the count of three? 1, 2, 3.
Happy Phantoming.
Smooth.
Awesome.
500 years ago, he washed ashore the sole survivor of a shipwreck. And upon the skull of the man who killed his dad, he said, I'm mad, I must eradicate piracy, injustice and cruelty, and all my sons will follow me, so evildoers will believe that this man cannot die. The Phantom, the ghost who walks. The Phantom, enemies beware, the Phantom's always there, but you won't find the Phantom. He fights